Hello, this is Gary Malcation. This is my presentation on Beverly Cleary. Beverly Cleary is a beloved writer of books for children whose real life Portland neighborhood growing up served as a setting for many of her books. She wrote or was the contributor for over 50 books. She's known for her realistic stories about the minutiae of a child's daily life, which at the time was a fairly radical idea. Her understanding of the real struggles children encounter resonates with her readers. She was born in McMinnville, Oregon. She grew up on a farm in Yamhill, Oregon, which didn't have a library until her mother, a school teacher, set one up. She was descended on both sides of her family from pioneers. In fact, the house that she grew up in, built by her grandfather, was considered the first fine house, her words, in Yamhill, and it had the first bathroom in the entire county. Something to be proud of. It had 13 rooms, which sounds like a mansion. That's why it's called a fine house, I suppose. Why do they need 13 rooms? Well, her grandfather had 10 children, 8 of whom who lived, and they had multiple generations living in the house at the same time. At one time, they had 3 generations in the house. That house is today an historical Oregon landmark, I believe, not only because of its historical significance in terms of the pioneers who came to Oregon, but also because of the famous author who grew up there. She recounts in her book, Girl from Yamhill, being surprised one morning when her father was about to leave for work. Suddenly, all the sirens go off at the fire station, and all the church bells start ringing at the same time, and people are honking and shouting, and she doesn't know what's going on. And her parents get very, very excited, and her mother says to her, "Remember this day." And years later, she asked her mother, "Why was I supposed to remember that day?" Because it was the end of World War One, and she was 2 years old at the time. So it's kind of amazing that she has a recollection of that particular day. Now, for an author, another interesting thing is she didn't go to kindergarten and she did not learn to read until the second grade. In fact, when she was in the second grade, she was put into the lowest reading circle, which was called the Blackbirds. Well, of course, you would be put in the lowest reading circle if you didn't know how to read at all. There's some wonderful illustrations of her neighborhood that you can find. I've got a couple here on the slides. Uh, so her real life neighborhood in Portland, Oregon was the setting for a lot of her books. I think about a dozen of her books. Henry Higgins, Beezus, Ramona, the Ellen Tibbetts books. They all took place there, and you could see the streets, Klickitat Street, where Huggins and Ramona and Beezus lived, and then Tillamook Street, where Ellen Tibbetts lived. They're only a couple blocks away, and these are real streets, real places. So that's kind of cool. You can also see there a picture from the movie Ramona and Beezus, where the actress Joey King is climbing a sign, Klickitat Street. When she graduated from high school, Beverly left home to go to college. She first went to junior college, and then eventually she got a Bachelor of Arts in English from the University of California in Berkeley. Many of her YA books are set in California. While she was in Berkeley, she met her husband, Clarence Cleary, who was a graduate student. So that's kind of interesting. And you notice on the slide here in the bottom right, I've got a picture of Suzzallo Library at the University of Washington. It's also known as the Graduate Library. She recounts being in that library for many hours, or many days, because she was in the library science program at the University of Washington. After she graduated from UC Berkeley in '38, he went immediately to University of Washington and got a second bachelor's degree in library science, 1939. And most of the students there would have spent a lot of time there at the Suzzallo Library. After graduating from the UW, she got a job as a children's librarian in Yakima. And it was there that a young boy asked her Where are the books about kids like us? And she credits that as the reason why she started writing the books that she did. That she wanted the kids to have books that they could relate to, realistic books about other kids like them. Of course, Nancy Drew is not a realistic book about a child like you. Neither are Hardy Boys. This may not seem like a radical idea now, but it was a rather radical idea at that time. Her first book was Henry Higgins. Henry Higgins was first rejected by publishers. She had to rewrite it, and when she rewrote it, that's when she put in the characters of Beezus and Ramona. And she said that Henry was really based on the boys that she knew when she was growing up. And there are several books. Henry Higgins, I keep saying Henry Higgins. You'll get yours, Henry Higgins. No, that's My Fair Lady. Henry Huggins is this book. Henry Huggins, Henry and Beezus, Henry and Ribsy, Henry and the Paper Route, and Henry in the Clubhouse. Then there's Ribsy and the PTA, which was reprinted as a standalone book, like a sort of novella. But in fact, it was simply a chapter out of Henry and Ribsy. So, whether you want to consider that another book or not, include that in the 50. I mean, that also kind of depends on how you do the calculation of how many books she wrote. She wrote about a book a year, which is pretty phenomenal, whether it was 49 or 57, any way you slice it, it was pretty phenomenal output of work. And then, of course, another book called Ribsy. So after those, then she wrote a book about the girls across the street, and the first book was Beezus and Ramona. And it was really written from the perspective of Beatrice, known as nicknamed Beezus. And she created a character. I think it was suggested to her that she include a kindergarten child in this. First of all, she put in a sibling for Beezus because she thought, well, none of my characters have siblings, and somebody ought to have a sibling. So she put in Ramona. And she was kind of reticent to do so because she didn't really know too much about being a kindergartner. She was never a kindergartner herself. But she put it in, and then she saw this little girl who was a neighbor girl skipping down the street. And this little girl had just come home with a package of butter that her mother had sent her to the store to buy. And she had it all unwrapped, and she was licking it enthusiastically with every step as she was skipping down the street. And it cracked Beverly up, and it reminded her of, her own early childhood, I think, perhaps. And that child became the model for Ramona. And later, when she had two children of her own, when they eventually went into kindergarten and beyond, their experiences also got factored into what she wrote about with Ramona. Now, Ramona really kind of stole the show right from the beginning. So the next book she came out with was Ramona the Pest. Lots of people thought Ramona was a pest. Her sister thought she was a pest, although her sister had these ambivalent feelings because she kind of felt guilty about being angry at her little sister all the time because she knew that she should love her sister. Well, she eventually realizes that she does love her sister. And so eventually, this child became the star of her own book, and it was so popular that she really took over the whole series. And when the movie version came out, they borrowed essentially the title from the first book and switched the names. So instead of Ramona and Beezus, instead of Beezus and Ramona, the movie is Ramona and Beezus. And it's not really based on the first book very much, a little bit. Mostly it's based on, I think, Ramona and her father and Ramona Forever are part of that book. But they republished the first book, Ramona and Beezus, but redid the cover to look like the movie poster with the movie poster picture. And you can see it on the slide here. Beverly Cleary has won 3 Newbery Awards. 2 of them were for Ramona books. And her only National Book Award was also for Ramona. Beverly Cleary, in an interview with Jenna Bush, said that there's a word association that Jenna Bush was doing with her, and when she said Ramona Quimby, Beverly responded, "My favorite character." So it tells you something. Now, these are a couple of books. Ellen and Otis, I call it a duology. Ellen Tibbetts and Otis Spofford. These are books that they really kind of stand alone, but again, they take place in the same neighborhood. Although the other characters, Henry Huggins and Beezus and Ramona, they don't really factor into these stories at all. We don't see these characters interacting, but they live in the same neighborhood, only a couple blocks apart. We see that Ellen goes to ballet lessons, and she takes ballet lessons at the school that is owned by Otis's mother. And Otis is a very bright boy that is kind of bored, and he wants to cure his boredom by playing pranks on people. And yeah, Ellen, one of the things she's got this secret that she doesn't want anyone to know that she's her mother makes her wear this woolen underwear. So when she goes to change her clothes to go to dance lessons, she hides in the broom closet at the dance school and changes her clothes there. And then she winds up finding out that this other girl, Austin, is her mother makes her do the same thing, and she's also wearing this woolen underwear, and she's trying to be secret about it. So the two girls bond over this, and then later in school, she thinks Austin is pulling on her sash and won't stop pulling on her sash, and finally she turns around and slaps her. Well, it wasn't Austin; it was Otis, and this really causes a rift between them, which is the plot. That is the conflict of the first book, Ellen Tibbetts, as she tries to regain this friendship back again. In the second book, Otis realizes he goes too far with his pranks when he cuts off a chunk of Ellen's hair in class. In fact, all the classmates know that this is too far, and they get the whole class gets angry at him, and he winds up leaving the class in tears. And so Ellen and Austin decide that they're going to get even with him. So they go out to the pond where he's ice skating, and they steal his shoes so that he has to go home all the way in his ice skates. So that is that book. First Love. Now, I have to admit here, I don't really read romance novels. Although I did watch Pride and Prejudice. Actually, I did read Pride and Prejudice eventually. Um, not so into these. I was never a 15-year-old girl, but these were very popular books. Lots of people feel that she really captures the angst that and the real emotions that girls go through. The first book, 15, is about a girl at Woodmont High School in California, where so Woodmont High School is fictional. California, as far as I know, is real. Which Beverly lived in California when she was in college. She later left when she graduated from college, went to UW, went to Yakima, got married to Clarence Cleary, and then she moved back to California, and that's where they lived and had two children. So she was writing somewhat. Again, she writes from places that she knows. She was writing about what it's like to be in California. And this first book, 15, the girl is likes a boy who likes somebody else, and the other girl isn't very nice to him, and it it's kind of a stereotypical chick flick kind of book, but I think it does resonate with an awful lot of girls. One reviewer said, "I found this book excruciating to read because her portrayal of a 15-year-old it matches exactly what I went through at that age. It makes me really glad I'm no longer a teenager." Uh, uh, Another interesting book is Sister of the Bride. My picture here is kind of blocking it, but that is what the name of the book is, Sister of the Bride. That one is set in San Francisco, which is where Beverly lived with her husband. So now, again, she's using a setting that she knows, San Francisco. And the girl's sister, who's the bride that's getting married, she is a student at, guess where? UC Berkeley, exactly where Beverly went. Again, so this is like art imitating life. And she falls in love with whom? Another student, a grad student, which is also very similar. Beverly Cleary also fell in love with a grad student. And her parents don't approve of her marrying this kid for a lot of different reasons. Uh, which is interesting because Beverly's parents also did not approve of her marrying Clarence because he was Catholic. Now, that wasn't the problem in this book. There were other things having to do with, well, she wasn't finished with school yet, and they thought there were some social class differences, that this other boy was, a higher class or something. So it's similar, but it's interesting that Beverly um, wanted to use this. And in this case, she didn't get married until after she finished 2 degrees, unlike this girl who's getting married after 1 year of college. So you kind of wonder, is she wistfully wishing that she had gotten married sooner, or is she giving advice that no, you really should wait a little bit? Leave it to Beaver. Now, this surprised me. I hadn't realized that Beverly Cleary wrote novelizations of a television show. It it doesn't seem like something I would have expected her to do, but it's interesting. I guess she's writing about adolescent kids who get into trouble, and it's interesting. It makes sense that they would want a famous author like her to take over the books. So she writes some books about Beaver Cleaver, Beaver being a nickname for Theodore Cleaver and his brother Wally, as Beaver gets into all kinds of trouble and learns important life lessons, which maybe you recall that was basically the plot of every episode, if you ever saw the old black and white series. In these series of books, there's things like Beaver learns about taking out a loan, he learns about playing baseball, and he learns about earning money when he decides that he maybe should be helping out his parents making money. Mouse on the Motorcycle. I love these books. My third grade teacher read aloud The Mouse and the Motorcycle to us, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was kind of cheesy that, the motorcycle would run if you went "Oh," like that. Even a third grader, I think even a first grader knows that's not really true. But okay, it's a fantasy thing, and we have to have some way for the mouse to have a working motorcycle. We can't just have him, having endless batteries for this thing. So So Ralph gets this motorcycle. Ralph is this mouse that lives in a hotel, and he finds this boy Keith with a toy motorcycle, and they strike up a friendship. And eventually, Keith lets him use his motorcycle, his toy motorcycle, and shows him how to make it run by making the noise. And so Ralph just drives that motorcycle all over the hotel and has a great time. In the second book, Ralph decides that he wants to get out of the hotel. He's getting a lot of pressure from his overbearing family, and he decides he wants to escape. So he escapes to summer camp, where he meets a boy named Garf. And a lot of people think it was kind of interesting. The boy was um, a lonely boy, and they're able to strike up a friendship. And he's helping Garf, but Garf is also helping him. And eventually, Ralph realizes he wants to go back and be with his family. Here's another duology. This is about a boy named Lee Botts. The first book is the other book that she wrote that got a Newbery Award called Dear Mr. Henshaw, where he writes a letter to his favorite author. Apparently, he's been writing this guy a letter a year, and now he's writing to him as part of a class assignment, and he's asking him a lot of questions. And this leads to the author writing him back, and before long, they're starting up a correspondence between each other. And as he's asking questions of the boy, Lee eventually starts through the correspondence revealing his struggles with his parents' divorce, a school bully, and just general problems with being the new kid in school. In the next book, Strider decides with his friend Barry to take shared custody of a dog that they found. Again, very similar to Henry Huggins in the very first book, who wanted to take home a found dog, Ribsy. And so again, there's this dog that's found that needs a home, and they decide, this is kind of a novel idea, but it's based on the fact that, of course, his parents have gone through this divorce, and now he's, got this idea that, well, you can share custody. So he and this other boy share custody of Strider, but eventually starts realizing this other boy, Barry, isn't really taking very good care of Strider. So he wants to have full custody, which again is very similar to a whole lot of divorce cases, and with parents feeling that the other parent is not doing a very good job, rightly or wrongly. Um, and some people find that it's not. Publishers Weekly said it lacks the emotional intensity that made Cleary's Newbery winner, Dear Mr. Henshaw, an instant classic, but they still thought it was a very good book. That this boy, not only is he helping the dog, but the dog is helping him deal with his parents' separation, his difficult relationship with his dad, and even, his attractions to girls. So these books, the books about the twins, are really written for little kids. This is like preschool, kindergarten, maybe first grade, but not much older than that. So maybe second grade. These are for fairly early readers. They are essentially picture books. And Two Times the Fun is really a compilation of four picture books: The Real Whole, Two Dog Biscuits, Growing Up Feet, and Janet's Thingamajigs. Now these are twins. They love each other, but they irritate each other. They have their differences. Jimmy likes to dig. Janet wants to pretend to be a bird. Things that maybe little kids could relate to. There are several other books that Beverly Cleary wrote that really are not part of any series. They are Emily's Runaway Imagination, where this girl gets in trouble because she does things like she bleaches a horse, and she just lets her imagination run away with her. I guess she wanted a white horse. Uh, book about twins, Mitch and Amy. Be interesting if instead of Mitch and Amy, she had done Janet and Jimmy grown up, but that's not what she did. She created a new book called Mitch and Amy, who were always fighting with each other, but then they realize that they need each other. Particularly, Mitch is really not liking the way a bully is picking on his sister Amy, and they decide they need to stop squabbling about that. A cat named Socks, who's jealous of the attention that the new baby is getting, and there's a boy named Chuck, Lucky Chuck. He takes a very reckless motorcycle ride, and he winds up running into the law and learning a valuable lesson. And there's a girl named Maggie, and her nickname, the kids call her Muggy Maggie, because she can't write cursive very well, and so it looks like she wrote Muggy when she wrote Maggie. She doesn't understand the reason why she needs to write cursive writing. That she's got a computer, she can just use that. Why does anybody need to be able to read cursive writing? It's interesting. This book was written in 1990. Of course, there were computers coming out then, and today almost nobody is teaching in schools cursive writing. So this book may have been ahead of its time. This is a short story collection. Uh, These are some books that were not written by, I mean, where she was a contributor. She wasn't the primary author. So It's Heaven to Be Seven, It's Fine to Be Nine, and School's In. Those are all scholastic books that were written with multiple authors. You can see Judy Blume, Patricia McLaughlin, and Danielle Pinkwater, and various others are contributors to those books, published by Scholastic. And then Two Times the Fun, I already mentioned that, but I kind of threw it in here as well because it is a story collection. And that is the collection of the twins' picture books. And then here's a list of the picture books. Again, there's four that I already mentioned earlier on another slide. and there's a Hullabaloo, ABC, and Petey's Bedtime Story. Now, these are interesting. These are very interesting. I started reading these. I haven't finished them. I intend to finish them. They're actually quite interesting. Of course, a writer is going to be good at writing about her childhood. Anyone who drew on her childhood so much as Beverly Cleary did. So, A Girl from Yamhill is about growing up on the farm in Yamhill. It goes up until really through high school. It doesn't go to college. The next book is college. So the other book, My Own 2 Feet, again, she's learning to stand on her own 2 feet. She is about her experiences going to college at UC Berkeley and at the UW and eventually becoming a writer. And that book ends with Henry Huggins getting published, being accepted by a publisher. I want to read to you a quick blurb from a quote from the first book, A Girl from Yamhill. This is about an early memory. Thanksgiving. Relatives are coming to dinner. The oak pedestal table is stretched to its limit and covered with a silence cloth and white damask. The sight of that smooth, faintly patterned cloth fills me with longing. I find a bottle of blue ink, pour it out on one end of the table, and dip my hands into it. Pat a pat, all around the table I go, inking handprints on that smooth white cloth. I do not recall what happened when aunts, uncles, and cousins arrived. All I recall is my satisfaction in marking with ink on that white surface. Okay, that's hilarious. I begin to understand why Ramona Quimby is her favorite character. She is Ramona Quimby. She's writing about herself. It's just, I love that. I love that story, and I recommend that you get these books. Again, both of these books, I just downloaded them from the KCLS library. You can get the ebooks, very easy to download and read. She is an award-winning author. I have put the major awards up here. If I were to list every award, I think I would have to do 10 more slides. If I pretty much every book that I've mentioned and several that I didn't have won some sort of award. Um, but these are the major ones that she won. William Allen White Children's Book Award for Socks, Laura Ingalls Wilder Medal in 1975. That is just for her body of work. She got the Newbery for Ramona again, three books: Ramona and her father, Ramona and her mother, and Ramona no, sorry. Ramona and her father and Ramona Quimby, age 8. That's she got the Newbery for. Got the National Book Award for Ramona and her mother. And another Newbery for Dear Mr. Henshaw. He got award from Catholic Library Association, Hans Christian Andersen Award, Children's Book Council's Every Child Award. Then, pretty cool, she got the Library of Congress Living Legend Award in the year 2000. And there you can see the picture of her receiving the National Medal of Arts from President George W. Bush in the year 2003. And standing right next to her, yeah, is of course Ron Howard. So that's pretty cool that she's in such august company winning these awards. If you go back to an earlier slide, you will see the picture of her neighborhood. You will see in the middle of that map, there is a place called Grants Park. It is a real place. This is it. This is Grants Park, where they have honored her work by putting up 3 statues, statues of Henry Huggins, Ribsy, and Ramona Quimby. And Ramona and Ribsy are standing on water fountains. Yeah, I put a couple insert photos there. You can see Ribsy has got the water coming up. Ramona's also wearing a raincoat and boots, and she's got water at her feet too. You can't see it in this picture, but in other pictures you can. That she's got water spraying. That at certain times when they turn on the water, it looks like Ramona and Ribsy are playing in the water, which is, you know, pretty much in character and pretty cool. They do not have a statue, as far as I can tell, of Beezus in the park. I think we should start a letter writing campaign or something. Maybe Selena Gomez, who played the character in the movie, could commission something like that. But if you ever get down there to Grants Park, that would be pretty cool to check that out. Here is a list of references that I used when putting together the slideshow. I used several more when I was doing the write-up, but these will certainly get you going if you want to learn more about Beverly Cleary. And pretty fascinating woman, pretty fascinating life, and certainly, and just an amazing and influential children's book author who inspired so many children, and so many authors have followed in her footsteps. And will say, Judy Blume among them, will say that they inspired her and she was a big influence on their lives. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.